My name is Keith, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was interested in being a part of the entertainment business. And I've done many things throughout that time, from singing in bands, writing music, hosting television shows, everything involved in the professional wrestling business. And I've written comic books, done a lot of things, and almost all of those things failed in some way or another. But I still kept going. I still wanted to continue to create. And there's just something in me that drives me to create. And I started thinking, well, what is it that drives anyone to create? And that's going to be the point of this podcast. We're going to talk to people from all aspects of the entertainment industry. We're going to find out what made them interested in creating art, and why, when faced with success, when faced with failure, the ups and downs of life and life in the entertainment business, they continue to create. So, and hopefully we'll have some good and interesting conversations along the way that you'll be interested in hearing. So tune in to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. And this week we have a guest who is an author. He is a movie producer. He's a journalist. He's a podcast and TV host. I think that a lot of people should be familiar with him. And if you're not, we'll help you get a little more familiar with him today. Mr. Evan Ginzburg.
Great to be on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. When you first started out creatively, you were a writer in the beginning, right? Is that?
Yeah, I was an early sheet writer, sheet as in dirt sheet, because at the time in the 80s, a lot of the wrestlers and promoters were not happy that people were quote unquote exposing the business. And later I started my own newsletter, Wrestling Then and Now, and it ran pretty much for 20 years. And Killer Kowalski was a columnist, and we had a lot of support from, guys who understood we were honoring the business. I wasn't really doing news. I was doing more history and, nostalgia and reminiscing. I first started going to wrestling 50 years ago, June 24, 1974, Madison Square Garden, Bruno and Jay Strongbow against Nikolai and Fred Blassie. So, I have 50 years of memories, and with other writers and such, we honored the business, and, it's very different than the Observer or the Torch or other sheets of that era.
Yeah, and through kind of the nature of your newsletter, you mentioned Killer Kowalski did a column. You formed a relationship with quite a few people in the wrestling business, right? I remember seeing somewhere that you were pretty close with Nikolai Volkov, right?
Yeah, Nikolai, I would book as an agent. You see, what happens with the wrestling business is one thing always leads to another. And so I was doing Wrestling Then and Now newsletter, which became Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary, which you could watch on Tubi or Amazon Prime or whatnot, different platforms. And yeah, Nikolai is in the film, and he was a dear friend. And when my own mother died, Nikolai called, and, just it means a lot when your heroes become friends. And so from being an agent, I was sitting with Nikolai Volkov and Johnny Valiant at an autograph signing in a wrestling store in New York. And by sheer coincidence, the executive producer of The Wrestler, Scott Franklin's best friend, so people get a little confused with these titles. Executive producer is the money guy, the guy who makes the deals, gets the movie financed, gets the movie made. So I'm sitting with Nikolai and Johnny, and they were very warm, funny, fan-friendly, just good human beings. And so we're talking to the executive producer of the wrestler movies, best buddy, and he's like, "We're doing this movie, The Wrestler. We think you guys would be perfect." And, exchange cards, exchange numbers, whatever. This happens 1,000 times at conventions and appearances. Yeah, 6 months or so go by. I hadn't heard anything, and it was almost forgotten. Then all of a sudden, Darren Aronofsky, one of the world's greatest filmmakers, calls me, and let's have a meeting. So I'm like, wow, this is real. And we go to meet Aronofsky and Scott Franklin and the screenwriter and a couple other guys from his crew. I bring Nikolai, Johnny Valiant, Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts up in Calgary, Nikita Brezhnikov, who was Nikolai's shoot manager. He would take him on the road for appearances, just like I did with Johnny Valiant. And we just hit it off. I mean, these guys were telling road stories, and the Aronofsky and the crew just were enamored. These guys were 80s Hulkamania, rock and wrestling, Vince's expansion era fans. And he has two of the guys that were there, Johnny V and Nikolai Volkov. And so next thing I know, I get offered, would you like to be the associate producer on The Wrestler, which is the wrestling guy. I was the wrestling guy. I brought in Mickey Rourke's trainer, his stunt double. I did a half dozen casting calls with over 100 different wrestlers. I brought in Ron Killings, Romeo Roselli, a ton of indie guys. I brought in Afa, who just passed. Afa helped train Mickey, and Afa's boys helped train Mickey. And so I know that's a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to show is one thing always leads to another. And it's been an interesting ride, and it still is.
Yeah, that's sort of the theme of the whole podcast. Like, we follow people's creative journeys, and it's always, you start out with one thing, and then that goes to another thing, and then it continues on, and then the next thing you know, you might be doing something that you never dreamed you were going to do. Like, I'm sure that when you started your newsletter, you didn't think you were going to be involved in making a movie with Mickey Rourke. I mean, I'm sure that was.
Making a movie where he was nominated for the Academy Award and won
Yeah.
the Golden Globe Award, Best Actor in the entire world. So I'll tell you another funny story. I'm on set one day. We were shooting in 2008, I believe it was, and I'm on set, and all of a sudden, Aronofsky gets this smirk and he goes, "Evan, come here." And I go, "Yeah." And this is that autograph scene. And he goes, "I have no makeup, nothing. I'm just standing there." And he goes, "Evan, work the room, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for a autograph and a Polaroid." So Mickey walks up to me, whispers in my ear, he goes, "Just improv it." He thinks I'm an actor. I'm not an actor. So it was the only actual pro wrestler that was in that scene was Johnny Valiant, who I brought in. Manny Yarborough was there also. He was a black sumo who fought in UFC. He was a friend of mine. Wonderful guy. He's gone now also. A lot of these guys are gone.
Yeah.
So I'm walking around the room. I walk up to Mickey last. The whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say to him? Because we're improving it. And I say to him what I would to any, legendary wrestler. I said, "I loved you as a kid. I saw you at the Garden, Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph?" And he looks at me and he goes, "What's your name?" So now I'm thinking, and I go, "Evan." So how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. Absolutely surreal.
Yeah.
So jump ahead, we're, we're at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, 2,300 people, sold out, 40 bucks a ticket. And I'm in the audience with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. This was a long time ago. I'm in the audience with her. I don't know if I made the cut or not. I'm not editing the movie. I'm the wrestling guy. So I'm sitting there like anybody else watching the movie. And all of a sudden, I come on screen and she looks at the screen and she looks at me and she looks back at the screen and she goes, "That's you. That's you." How bizarre this whole thing was. So another quick story, the night of the New York Film Festival, which is a very prestigious festival. Um, we worked on this film off and on for 7 years. 7 years. People have no idea what goes into making, a quality film. And I'm looking around. It's the scene where Mickey and his daughter are having this really heated discussion, and he goes, "I'm just a broken down piece of meat." And everybody around me is crying. Everybody around me. And I go, wow, it works. It works. You can't fake crying. These were just people watching the film in the audience. And we walked out, and, tons of paparazzi, and it was. I tell people it was the best day of my life, the New York Film Festival when we first screened it. Am I allowed to curse on your show?
Sure. Yeah.
So the at the after party, the film is all done. It's in the can. Aronofsky was a very down-to-earth, laid-back guy. His mom was a school teacher. He's not a rich kid born with a silver spoon. His mom was a New York school teacher. So he said he does a little speech, and I'll never forget it. He says, quote, this is a quote, I'm not paraphrasing. He goes, "I don't know what the fuck we have, but we have something."
Ah,
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. And man, he was right because, critical acclaim, the Golden Globe for Mickey, the Academy Award nomination. Um, it did 36 million domestic, which is nothing if you compare it to a Marvel superhero movie, but it was shot on 6 million, which is nothing. It was an indie film. A lot of those scenes, those were real fans. At one Ring of Honor show, the fans were angry that we were interrupting to film. It was like guerrilla filmmaking. So Aronofsky actually gets on the mic to the crowd and goes, guys, we just need one more quick take. We'll be out of here. We'll do you proud." Because they just wanted to watch their wrestling. They weren't interested in us. They wanted to see Nigel McGuinness and all these guys, Daniel Bryan, Brian Danielson at the time, and all these great guys who became legends were in Ring of Honor that era. So, yeah, so it was a great experience. And yeah, there's a lot of joy and pain. I have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling related, but that was one of the joys.
yeah. Yeah. I noticed, I mean, obviously we're friends on Facebook, and I've uh, been a Facebook friend of yours for years now.
Yeah.
And your opinion on the, at least the popular wrestling, like the TV wrestling, has kind of soured over the years.
Well, I sat with Aronofsky at a meeting, and at one point we actually met with Nicolas Cage because we couldn't raise the money we needed with Mickey. And Nicolas Cage, circa 2007, 2008, when we were working on this Hot and Heavy, he was a huge star. I mean, top box office.
Yeah.
And one day, I'm just sitting alone with Aronofsky, and he says to me, "Evan, Mickey's the right guy." Because he looked beaten down. Mickey was in the 80s, 20 years earlier, he was a top box office guy, sex symbol, matinee idol, whatever you want to call it. He gets disillusioned with Hollywood and goes off to box. He's getting punched in the face. This is unheard of in Hollywood. It's unheard of.
Yeah.
Okay. So my point being, Aronofsky went with the art, not with the money. And I was very impressed, because Nicolas Cage, who looked great at the time, he was in his 40s and he looked fit. And I spent an evening with him. I took him down the Ring of Honor, and we go backstage, and he's like, "Is this real?" He thought it was. He said, "Is this like UFC?" That's how convincing. And he knew nothing about wrestling. But that wasn't the reason he didn't get, chosen ultimately. Ultimately, Mickey was the right guy, as everybody could see. But my point is, I would say honestly, 90% of what Vince churned out was instantly forgettable vanilla pablum. And Triple H is lauded as the savior. I would say 80% of what he churns out is crap. I'm watching SummerSlam. 7 matches, 7 screw job finishes. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre are fighting over a friendship bracelet. The brain cells were just dying. I'm watching this. I mean, thousands of brain cells were seeping out of my head. And then is Dom going to kiss Liv or Rhea? Is Dom going to leave with Liv or Rhea? I'm like, I go back to like Stan Hansen breaking Bruno's neck and you have a blood feud. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not, let me just throw this in. I'm not one of these guys who does there's no good wrestling since the territories. I think Gunther is great. That guy's totally old school. I think Cody's great. I think on the right night when Reigns showed up, he barely wrestled. He could be great. So I'm not one of these guys that just, you know, tosses the baby out with the bathwater. I thought at WrestleMania over the 2 days, there were 4 excellent matches. The 2 Cody matches, Bailey's match, and Gunther's match. Gunther always comes through with a great match. But SummerSlam to watch 7 screw job finishes and it insults your intelligence. And there wasn't one match I would qualify as great. Gunther's match was very, very good, but the stupid ending, takes it down a notch as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I started watching wrestling in '78, so I was a few years behind you, but
Yeah.
I definitely get what you're saying. It was um, presented as more of uh, a physical struggle. Today there's definitely a big emphasis on the story, and the match is kind of secondary, which I don't like. I mean, for sure, I prefer my favorite wrestling promotion of all time is the AWA. So, I mean, that's where I'm at.
I
You
saw the
know,
AWA in New Jersey. They would come in Pro Wrestling USA and
right?
AWA. Saw Bockwinkel against Zabisco. Bockwinkel was amazing, and he wasn't a kid at the time. And I'll tell you, over the years, I've interviewed tons and tons of wrestling legends, and they said to me many times they felt that Prime Ray Stevens was the greatest of all time. Prime Ray
Yeah,
Stevens. Yeah.
yeah. Wrestlers really respected him a lot. Yeah, I used to watch it. I'm from upstate New York, so I used to watch it on WPIX when
Oh,
I was
okay.
a kid. Yeah, we used to get it out there, but yeah, there's definitely been a big shift from uh, the wrestling in the '70s and even the '80s. Because the '80s was cartoony, but I mean, you'd still get good physical matches. You
Yeah.
just don't really get that anymore.
I
Um,
loved Heel Piper. Heel
oh yeah,
Piper was unbelievable. He'd come out at the Garden headline. The match was 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes. You didn't know what he was going to do second to second because he didn't know what he was going to do second to second. It was just like it was like a tornado hit the ring and then it was over and you could breathe again. It was so exciting.
yeah.
Piper and Orton together.
Uh,
Cowboy Bob Orton. They were amazing, but jump ahead by 86, 87, it was pretty much a cartoon. And by the late 80s, it was all, characters. This guy's a plumber, and this guy, I mean, it just, So I started going to the NWA in Philly and Baltimore and other places monthly. And that was, I tell people the NWA mid to late 80s, even up to 89 with Terry Funk and Ricky Steamboat. I'm like, that was the best live wrestling I ever saw. NWA live, especially in Philly every month.
Sure.
Flair and Ricky Steamboat at the Meadowlands. That was the best match I ever saw in 50 years.
Yeah, I actually I saw the NWA in Syracuse
Yeah.
at the fairgrounds. I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and man, that card top to bottom. The main event was Ricky Steamboat, or not Ricky Steamboat, sorry, Terry Funk and Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Can't
yeah,
beat
that was
that.
yeah for sure. And Muda and Sting wrestled on that show, and
Yeah.
oh man, yeah, it was great wrestling, and it was uh I don't know, it was definitely different than the WWF where there was a lot of stopping and starting, and I don't know.
Well, in the NWA, it was feuds and blood and the finish in the cage or whatnot.
Yeah,
Um, I tell people you had Flair on top, you had the Horsemen, you had the Russians, you had Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. You had guys like Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham who headlined the Garden, Madison Square Garden. Those guys were mid-card in the NWA for the most part. It
yeah,
was so you had Rick Rude, Manny Fernandez low on the card. That's how talent laden, the NWA was that era. Barbarian. Oh, it was they had such a great talent roster. And I tell people Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express, those were some of the greatest tag matches I ever saw. And Midnight
absolutely.
Express is my favorite tag team of all time.
Mine too.
Oh, there you
Mine
go.
too.
Brilliant
Yeah,
minds think alike. There you go.
absolutely.
There you
I
go.
think that the stuff that the Midnight Express did, um, doing double team wrestling, double team maneuvers during the match, not just saving it for the finish, but
Yeah.
in the flow of the match, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like watching them work together while the match is going on. There's not a lot of teams that do stuff like that. The Motor City Machine Guns
Yeah,
are
they're
really good
always
at
great
tandem
also.
moves during the match. Yeah. But there's really not a lot of teams who incorporate tag team maneuvers in the flow of a match like the Midnight Express could do. It was beautiful to watch, man.
Yeah, whether it was Condrey, who was more meat and potatoes, or
Yeah.
Lane, who was flashier, both the teams were great with Eaton and Cornette. And then you
Yeah.
had Big Bubba. It was just a perfect combination because Bobby was no talker, but he was as great as anyone that ever stepped foot in the ring. That guy was amazing.
Absolutely.
Super nice guy. I've met him several times, and what a shame he's gone. A lot of these guys, long trail of, lost guys along the way. Tough, tough business.
Yeah, I was watching SummerSlam 92 the other night for a podcast that I do with some guys, and it's just amazing like how many of them have passed away, and
Well, if you break it down, I mean, some people tend to disagree with me sometimes, but we did a documentary, 350 Days, and about half of the guys in the movie, which came out 5, 6 years ago, they're gone at this point. And the
yeah,
title came from the fact that the NWA champs wrestled literally 350 days. And while we were making the movie, Bret Hart said at his peak he was doing 330 days, and Greg Valentine, who's in the film, told us he did 320 days. So it's not any kind of like huge exaggeration.
right,
So you're on the road 350 days, 330, 320, whatever the case may be. You're eating crap. You're in different time zones, different days. When the WrestleMania era hit, you're crisscrossing the country. A lot of these guys couldn't handle it. Like guys like Barry Windham, they just like, I quit. I'm getting
yeah,
out of here. It's insane, and you can't blame them. So imagine the toll that takes, and then you get hurt. You get hurt. It's inevitable. Wrestlers hate the term fake. Why? They'll go, My shoulder replacement wasn't fake. My hip replacement wasn't fake. My 3 divorces weren't fake. My kid not talking to me because I was never ever at home isn't fake. So, so you get hurt. You're scared you're going to lose your income. You're going to lose your spot. Your wrestling hurt. So now the painkillers come in or whatever you need to get you through the night, to get you to the next town, to get you through the next match. I'll tell you the craziest story. The Valiant Brothers, who were #1 tag team in the world, they're wrestling. Jimmy pulls out a blade. By accident, he nicks Johnny in the eye. Not
Oh,
the eye, the eyeball. In the eyeball, not around the eye. So now he's wrestling in the match and he's blind in one eye. Okay? But this
wow.
is your bread and butter. You can't just, walk to the dressing room. So he wrestles blind in one eye. The punchline to the story, he wrestles a match the next night blind in one eye, and then finally goes to the doctor. And luckily, it was repairable. It just
Yeah,
like slightly, touched him in the eye, but the guy was blind.
right.
So, you're scared to lose your spot. And then you get the guys who they're 500, wrestling books and 5,000 shoot interviews in, and they think they understand all of this, and they go, "Oh, they all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and song." Some of these guys never broke 100 grand ever. Okay, the money came during the Hulkamania era. Before that, you had guys who headlined around the world, didn't break 100 grand, 3 meals a day, gas, tolls, food, taxes, sending money home to support your family. They did not, quote, all piss away fortunes. you know,
Yeah,
it's absurd. And it just becomes like a myth that's perpetuated. Sure, there's guys who made a lot of money and blew a lot of money. That's any industry. But you can't say all. You know, these
yeah,
these guys these guys all these guys all should have had pensions and health benefits. That's what they all should have had. Yeah.
yeah. Jesse Ventura has been fighting for that for forever. I remember, even during the '80s, he was a big like wrestling should be unionized guy. Like he's been on that for a really long time.
And then you have the
Uh,
guys who snitch him out, and
yeah,
he said
yeah,
Hogan. I'm just quoting him,
yeah,
so don't be mad
yeah.
at me if you're a Hogan fan. And and it doesn't happen because the guys on top who are making big money, they don't want anything to change. I'm the
Right.
boss's boy, and you know,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate that decades later, you're talking 40 years later, there's still no unions and pensions, and
right.
it's a shame. And today, at least, the top guys are making good money, but the indie guys are still a hot dog and a handshake. And if you get 25 bucks or 50 bucks or whatnot,
Yeah,
you're lucky. And so there's still a lot of exploitation. I mean,
yeah. 350 days. I mean, I've watched a lot of shoot interviews and things like that, but I think 350 days is probably the rawest documentary I've ever seen. Like it's really honest. Um, you never see Bret Hart open up like that. Like the stuff that he said in that documentary, you would never expect him to say. That was me personally watching it. I was shocked by the stuff that Bret Hart talked about.
well,
Um,
I appreciate you saying that. I'll tell you exactly what happened.
yep,
Right after doing The Wrestler, I did a documentary on wounded warriors. I didn't want to be typecast as just a wrestling guy. So another Darren Antola, approaches me to do 350 days. And at first, I really wasn't interested because you just can't top the wrestler. No matter
right,
what you do, you're not going to top the wrestler. So I could see he's talking from the heart. He's like, God, I loved Piper and Orndorff and like the guy. It was like, he's like reading my mind. And so, and he's a blue collar guy, honest guy. He's not a rich movie guy, and he just loved wrestling. So as we went through the process, I finally said yes. Let's do this. But I said documentary that everybody does where you go into the fanboy's house and there's 10,000 action figures. And I said, let's let these guys pour their hearts out, pour their hearts out.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We had superstar Billy Graham, Bret Hart. God, let me just rattle off some of the guys who were gone. That if
Please.
Yeah, Larry Sharp, the Wolfman, King Kong Mosca, George the Animal Steel, Paul Orndorff. I mean, so many of these guys are gone at this point. Lanny Poffo, who was a dear friend, Nikolai, they're all in this film, and so many of them, we lost them along the way, and it's like nobody was like tracking down the Wolfman for a movie, so we got him on film,
Right.
and yeah, so we're very proud of it, and so Michael Burlingame, the editor he was not a wrestling guy. And I said to Darren Antola, I said, this is our guy because he's not going to say this guy's, a star and this guy's an undercard guy. I don't even like to use the word jobber because people, it's disrespectful. That's
Yeah.
a different conversation. But so I said, this is our guy. He worked with Paul McCartney, Mariah Carey, Sting, not Sting the wrestler, Sting from the Police. And I said, this guy is going to go from the heart, like, what's the most powerful, poignant? And I said to him before we did this, I said, make a movie where an 80-year-old woman who never liked wrestling, make her cry. I said, that's the movie I want to make. I don't. You don't need let's go down to the training school and see them put the reporter in an arm bar. This shit's been done 1,000 times.
Right.
I said,
Right.
let these guys pour their hearts out. So there's a segment on injuries and like, Stan Hansen and these guys, they're pointing to like every part of the human body that's been broken, that's been surgically repaired. And the punchline to the whole movie is at the very end, guys like Billy Graham. Graham's actually laughing. He goes, would you believe I do it all over again? All the
Man.
suffering, all the pain, because Lanny Poffo would always say to me, Evan, I saw the world on the promoter's dime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, wrestling has taken me, around the world to different places, just from, film screenings and agent work and such. And yeah, so I've met some of the greatest people, closest friends in the world through wrestling. And I've met people I wouldn't spit on if they were on fire. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story. I booked Johnny Valiant to wrestle Jimmy Snooker on a New Jersey indie. This is probably 20, 25 years ago. It's all a blur.
Wow.
So they're both in their 50s at the time. They're not what they were, but it's still Johnny Valiant and Jimmy Snooker, and they still have something left in the tank.
Right.
So they put on a really good match, not what it would have been 10 years earlier, but they put on a really good match. Johnny pulls out a New York City Metro card and rakes Jimmy across the eyes, and Jimmy sells it like he's dead.
Yeah.
So the punchline to the story, the place is packed. The match was good. Everybody had a good time. It was the main event. And we go to get paid, me as the agent, to get Johnny's money. The Herculean sum of $350. And the promoter's doing the, guys, it wasn't a good house tonight. Can you
Uh,
take a little less? And I'm like, listen.
uh,
Every seat was full. He transed himself in here to get to the show. Give him what you promised him.
yeah.
And At the time, I'm a mild-mannered school teacher slash agent, and I'm the guy, give the guy his money. I'm like the,
Yeah.
and and, and knowing that you'll never work for the promoter again because you stood your ground and and this happened many, many times. I'm talking getting on planes and going to places and not getting what you were promised, or, there were times we would work conventions and he'd be signing autographs, and, there's nobody there because they didn't promote it well. They screwed up or whatnot. And the legends, it's like the WWE Hall of Fame. The legends are online, and the promoter's getting the cash from the door because he didn't have, the money that he promised everybody. And you're going from 20s to 10s to 5s to 1s, and
Oh man.
you're hoping that by the time you get to the front of the line, there's enough cash left to get
Yeah.
paid. So you wonder why I have a love-hate relationship with all of this. And I do the agent stuff a lot less than I used to, especially post-COVID. Yeah, it could be a very ugly business, and
Yeah.
I I mean, I could tell you horror stories from here to tomorrow, but I could tell you funny
Yeah.
stories from here to tomorrow. I mean, this is 50 years being involved with this in one capacity or the other.
Sure.
Yeah, 9/11, 2003, 2 years to the day after the fact. I have Johnny Valiant booked in Philly at a convention, and we're on this little puddle jumper 20-seater from Philly to New York, and it's 2 years to the day. The pilot looks like Lee Van Cleef. The pilot looks rough. He looks
Oh
rough. He
man.
looks like a bad guy in an action film. So we're like, is this guy gonna send us into the ocean? He didn't look like a pilot. A lot of these guys are clean cut. And
Right.
this guy looked like Lee Van Cleef. That's the best way I could explain it. So
Sure.
we're hitting turbulence and we're looking at each other. Like, is this it? It's like I'm gonna be the asterisk. Like wrestling legend
Right.
Johnny Valiant goes down in a plane, and like my name will be in little letters in the obit.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not what happened, but that's a funny story. I mean, there's
Sure.
so many memories, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of it, man. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So to back things up just a little bit,
sure.
um you you adapted pretty well to the digital age, from writing your sheet, and then now you're on the internet with websites and whatnot. What was that transition like, especially for someone who's so old school, like coming into like print is almost a dead media at this point. So
Yeah.
how was that? How
Very,
was that?
very difficult because I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I always had to rely on others, and like any quote unquote employee, and many times they were friends who just wanted to help and you would pay them, whatever the case may be. Um, we did Legends Radio, and we did Evan Ginzburg's Legends TV, etc., so on. And I was always reliant on other people. And you're doing a show today. One of my engineers died at age 34.
Whew.
Guy just died. He had a stroke, and that was it. So, you always had to, you know, like right now, I'm doing a monetized Facebook page, Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories, and that I can handle. That I can handle. But if
Yeah.
you gave me something elaborate, like shooting a TV show or whatnot, I just wouldn't have the tech skills. So, but over the years, it's been a joy for the most part until things come crashing down at some point because either somebody many times with projects, what people don't understand is it's a team effort, no matter what the project is, a movie, a TV show, even a podcast. It's a team effort. and everybody has to be on the same page, and everybody has to be reliable, and everybody, has to agree to, what is the goal here? What are we trying to do? I mean, there's a zillion podcasts that just ad nauseum let's go over every match on Raw, every match on SmackDown, every match on AEW TV. And to me it's stultifying. I mean, because I watch AEW, and I would say I enjoy a chunk of each show, and a lot of it is, I, I could live without it, but I don't need to overanalyze every match that I just saw. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get
Yeah.
it. But so if the host has this idea and the co-host has a different idea and the engineer has another idea, you have a dilemma. So basically, it has to be people who have the same vision, the same goal, and also what comes into play many times is money. Money. It's like, well, if we water down this, we can make more money. And the purist will go, I don't want to turn this show into crap. But the other guy will go, but we're spending all this time and effort and money to do this. We should be making money. And this becomes a whole thing. So many times, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, when people go, well, SummerSlam was a huge financial success, I go, okay, but if I didn't enjoy it, and it's so overpriced that it eliminates a chunk of the audience who can't even afford to take their wife and kid or kids, there's that end of it too.
Yeah.
And if Triple H at the press scrum boast how he broke the record-breaking gate, meanwhile, superstar Billy Graham and Bushwhacker Butch and Virgil and a ton of your guys who just died needed GoFundMe's to be buried or for their hospital bills. How about taking a chunk of that enormous profit like the NFL and set up a fund? Take 1% or half of 1% of your billions and help your pioneers and legends who never got paid what they should have to begin with. So it's all about money, okay, but I'm telling you the other side of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's easy to set attendance records when you're charging, or not attendance records, but financial records when you're charging astronomical amounts of money. I mean, it's not that impressive. It's just like every time a brand new movie comes out, it breaks the box office revenue
They
record.
charge more.
Well, yeah, that's because tickets are like $20 a piece now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't ever adjust it for inflation or anything. They just brag.
Yes.
Yeah,
So at WrestleMania 40, which was okay, like I said, there were two excellent matches each night. The rest I could have easily lived without. WrestleMania 40, VIP ringside packages were starting at $23,000. Starting at $23,000. At SummerSlam, just a regular seat, not a package, ringside, $966. 900. If I spent over $40 for that show, I would have been pissed off.
yeah,
SummerSlam. I mean,
man.
I don't get it. It actually, honestly, I do kind of get it. I think religion is on the wane today. And I think for some of these guys, this is their religion. They have no
Yeah,
other interest. It's like a religious pilgrimage. They'll cross an ocean for a pay-per-view, spend thousands and thousands of dollars. And honestly, you can't tell me everybody in a massive arena, 50,000 plus people, you can't tell me they're all rich. Somebody, it's an addiction. They're maxing out credit cards. They're going to get in trouble. Not everybody has 23 grand or even $966 for a wrestling ticket. Come
yeah,
on.
yeah, for sure. Um, I am trying to go to the Royal Rumble. A bunch of my friends want to go because it's in Indianapolis and I'm in Southern Indiana, but I'm worried about the financial toll that it's going to take on my wallet if we actually go and get decent seats. And uh, yeah, yeah,
Well, if you
yeah,
really need to be there, I'm not big on the Rumble because inevitably there's 30 guys and 27 don't have a shot in
yeah.
hell.
I hate
And,
that.
and,
Yeah,
and many
that's how
times
Jim
who's
Duggan.
going to win because
Yeah,
the booking's predictable, but
right.
you could try StubHub or Tick Pick at the last second or just buy a
Sure.
seat in the nosebleeds and they have giant screens. I mean,
Right,
I
right.
mean, I wouldn't cash out the kids' college fund. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
some of these geniuses probably do.
Right. I always say when they talk about the Rumble, Hacksaw Jim Duggan would never win the Royal Rumble now. Like adding the stipulation that the winner goes to WrestleMania
Yeah, and you
makes
know,
it
you know what
so
they're booking
predictable.
towards.
Yeah, it makes it so predictable. Um, so yeah, I used to really like the Rumble, but and there's been some good moments over the years, but now it's really really predictable. You always know who's gonna win. Like it's just yeah, it's silly.
And
Um,
and, and between the men, the women do it also, right?
yeah, yep,
Yeah, so
yeah. The women do
between
it now too.
between the two of them, it's like endless. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. You're looking at 2 hour plus long matches,
and
and then they're gonna do at least three
if you know
more.
who's gonna win, it's a long hour just to sit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Um,
just want to spend a weekend with your buddies, you see what's
yeah,
fun. What's fun is like we book talent into WrestleCon over the years, guys like Orndorff and Tito and Greg Valentine, and we would go to different indie events, and you could have a nice weekend. There's no what I find interesting with WWE pay-per-views or premium live events or whatever you want to call them.
right,
What I find is there's no guarantee Royal Rumble is going to be better than the previous one or the one after. It's all kind of hit and miss. I mean, you could get lucky and see a classic match on any given night, and other nights it's just kind of all instantly forgettable.
yeah. So, before we hop off here, I wanted to also talk about your books. Are they novels or are they nonfiction? Or I know you've published a couple of books. How did that come
I wrote a
about?
book, Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn. It's a short story collection, nonfiction, about growing up the only white kid on the block in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, in the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, it's a nonfiction short story collection. I'm working on a similar project, but it's not quite done yet. And I'm also working with Dr. Mike Lano, who is the president of the John Tolos fan club, on John Tolus's biography. And
Awesome.
history hasn't been kind to Tolos because the geniuses at the Olympic Auditorium taped over. They taped over each TV show to save 25 bucks on the tapes. So
Cool.
there's not a lot of footage of the guy. But when I was a kid, Tolos was as great a heel. You can't imagine how great this guy was.
Yeah.
So at Madison Square Garden in '74, Tolos came in to wrestle Bruno. I mean, he was a huge, huge star, but you don't hear a lot about him. But for those who don't know, he was as great a promo guy as anybody. He was always in shape, but he was a normal sized guy, like
Right.
5'11", 6 feet. He wasn't like a monster, but so he was a normal sized guy. He wasn't the best wrestler in the world, but he was so entertaining and so exciting. An innovator. He brought a snake in the ring years before Jake the Snake,
Yeah.
etc. So on. So they did a gimmick where Tolis blinds Fred Blassie. He throws powder in his eyes, and they actually bring Blassie to a real hospital to sell it back then.
Right.
And so they end up wrestling in a stadium in LA, and they draw 27,000 people, and it's on closed circuit in movie theaters, like the Muhammad Ali fights of the era. This is how big Tolis was, and that's before WrestleMania, closed circuit. And so I think he's more than worthy of a book. Everybody and his mother has a wrestling book today.
Yeah.
So, But like anything else, you try to do it right, and it takes a lot of time. But that's a labor of love. You're not going to get rich on a Tolos book because half his fans are
Sure.
dead by this point.
Yeah.
Tolos
Yeah.
goes back. He's been dead. He's been dead a while,
Right.
Yeah.
I remember Polis. I don't know. Do you remember the California wrestling that used to come on MSG every once in a while on the MSG network in the 80s?
From the
Uh,
Olympic Auditorium,
with
Tolos.
Rocky Johnson and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I remember watching him on that.
Yeah.
And then of course, I remember him coming to the WWE as the coach for Mr. Perfect, and
That was a disaster.
yeah, it was pretty bad.
Well, what
Um,
happened? What happened was he was in his late 50s at the time. He was still in shape, and
yeah,
you know,
so they had to put
but
him in a tracksuit.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
yeah,
Vince doesn't want him wrestling. Vince doesn't want him taking bumps, and then Vince says, "I don't want you talking." He's one of
yeah,
the best promo guys in history.
yeah,
Vince gets ideas, and sometimes they're brilliant, and sometimes they're idiotic. I mean, you have one of the greatest promo guys ever, and we don't want you talking. Just blow the whistle. That'll be annoying. That's your gimmick. So he's miserable. It doesn't get over, and next thing you know, he's out on his ass. He had a better run with Herb Abrams of all people in UWF because at least they let him be Toeless.
right, sure,
He's a good.
sure,
He was heel managing. He's getting in his licks. He's doing the promos. So Tolos, when he came into Wrestle Bruno, he gets on TV and he does a set of tapings to promote the match. And he calls Bruno a spaghetti bender. Spaghetti bender.
sure,
Back then, this is like hot stuff. And
right,
Bruno's seething. He insulted my nationality.
yeah,
And it's a different time. Today you'd have to do 36 high spots to get the heat that one word got.
right, right, for sure, for sure. So, um, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up here. We like to try to keep the shows under an hour for uh so the fans aren't sitting there for 100 years. But
I could do 3 hours if you ever want me
sure,
back.
yeah, yeah, I can tell. Um, so we've already kind of touched on it, but I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor up to you. Where can we find you and right now on the internet or wherever?
Well, check out Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. I am the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. We have 1,000 articles on wrestling's rich history, and I wrote about 75 or so of them. I lose count. Um, and usually when I write, it's on somebody I knew, and it's from the heart, burying friends, unfortunately. And but there's 1,000+ articles on there, ProWrestlingStories.com. Check out Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary on Tubi, Amazon Prime, other platforms, 350 Days, as we were talking. I don't think I really need to plug the wrestler.
Yeah, probably not.
But man, thank you for your support. I enjoyed it. It's
Absolutely.
very therapeutic doing a show like this.
Yeah, yeah. One last thing before we go. We
Oh,
always
no
like
rush,
to
no rush.
we always like to ask the guests this, sort of to wrap things up. What keeps you going? Like wrestling is obviously up and down, and you kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. But what keeps you creating, from the writing to the movies to the wrestling commentary? Like what keeps you going with all of this?
Um, there was a movie called Once. It's a beautiful film. It's
I
about
love that movie.
what a great movie. What a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
street musicians in Europe. And they shot it on 125 grand. And they win the Oscar. The band is called the Swell Season. Tremendous musicians. And I'm more an R&B, blues, jazz guy. And but anyway, so they're at the Academy Awards. They're talking in front of 1 billion people, and they go, create art, create art. Don't create content. Don't create schlock. Okay? Create art. And my friend said to me, and I hadn't really thought about it. He said, when Aronofsky put you, meaning me, actually into the wrestler acting, he said that was his gift to you. Because long after we're all gone, people will be watching that. So, when people go, oh, WWE's making billions, create art. Gunther creates art. Cody on the right night creates art. You know, so that's what really keeps me going. I don't do anything for the money because honestly, you don't get rich from any of it. It's not about the money. It's about pouring your heart out, whether it's the printed page, whether it's on film. The best film I've seen in this century, 21st century, is a little indie called Wendy and Lucy with Michelle Williams, shot on pennies. It's about this poor girl. All she has is a dog and a broken down car. This heap. And all of a sudden, she has no money. The car breaks down and it sets off a chain reaction. And it's heart-wrenching, So I don't need the 17th film in an action franchise. Give me that great little indie film that's going to move people and that'll live forever. And yeah. So if I write a book or do a film, whether it's a documentary or a scripted film, whatever the case may be, even on my Facebook page, I just pour my heart out. I don't care if somebody's pissed off. I'm just gonna speak my mind and that's it. So I know that's another long-winded answer, but create art, people. You don't need endless content. Those guys doing video, the guy has a six-pack of abs, the hot woman has the cleavage. Once they hit 30, they're done. They're done. Make a great movie 1,000 years from now, people will watch it. Seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Evan, thank you so much.
Thank
This has
you.
been
Thank you.
this has been captivating. Honestly, I've loved this time with you.
Appreciate it. Same here.
And like I say every week, I want to thank my producer Tyler because much like you, I am not tech savvy, and I couldn't do this without him. I sit here and talk to the people who come in, and in a lot of ways, it's their show more than it's mine. And Tyler helps me get it out there to the world. So Tyler Martin and M&E Studios, thank you so much. Thank you again to Evan Ginzburg, and we will see you guys next week with the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast.